Good morning to everyone on this very wintry day. Today we'd like to welcome Lauren Fischer from Harmony at Home SA. She is a wellness counsellor and postpartum coach, and she is registered with the ASCHP, and her focus is on holistic well-being within the family unit. So there's quite a lot to unpack here. I'm very excited to do this with you, and I'm going to be handing over now.
Thank you so much. It is so wonderful to be a part of this. And I must say, I just love what you're doing with these conversations and creating this space for people to learn and to have access. So thank you so much for this and for the wonderful introduction. Yes, so I'm Lauren Fischer and I'm a wellness counsellor and postpartum coach. And my work is really all about helping families to navigate daily life challenges, big life challenges, and really about building that reconnection in the home. I think connection is so vital, and I think it is something that we tend to lose sight of just because we live such busy, hectic lives. The connection is really important. Whether you're navigating those early days of motherhood, whether you're a couple who has, are in the thick of parenting and feel like you're losing a bit of that connection, or whether it's your child who's needing some help processing and unpacking emotions, is space for everyone.
Amazing. Fantastic. So let's start with the wellness counselor and postpartum. So who would you describe as a typical person that would benefit from both roles, the postpartum and the wellness counselor, or maybe you want to describe it as a particular scenario? I'll leave that up to you.
Perfect. So postpartum coaching, so primarily I work with mothers because as we know, postpartum is an emotional space. There's so many physical, hormonal changes that are going on. Mentally, there's a lot that we need to watch out for as well. There's things like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and also just baby blues as well. So primarily I work with moms, and it's all about unpacking, processing what is going on, this identity shift, this new role that we've taken on. And it's such a beautiful space to work within because there's just so much going on. And it's also just being there for these moms and I like to always say, being a guide. It's not someone who's coming in and telling you X, Y, and Z, you need to do this, but a helping hand, a friend, a shoulder to lean on. And it's not about having all the answers as well. It's just that support, which is so beautiful. But in saying that, we cannot ignore that fathers and even siblings often need a little bit of postpartum coaching themselves, because if we look at dads go through an identity shift as well. They go through a whole role change as well. So there's a lot that needs to be processed and unpacked there. Oftentimes we see that dads don't really know where they fit in anymore. So it's about bringing them in. And in terms of siblings as well, I mean, if they are older children, adjusting to an infant in the house is big, it's huge. So we need to look at all members of the family. So that is postpartum coaching. And then with the wellness counseling, it is really available to anyone who needs a little bit of emotional processing, who needs to move through a life challenge or change. So that's adults, that's children as well. And it's unpacking, processing, looking back also at our past, at our history, how it's impacting our current situation as well. So yes. Also a very beautiful, sensitive space to work within. And I must say, I'm just so incredibly blessed and honored to work with the people that I do in these spaces.
That sounds so wonderful. It sounds like it can be very beneficial in a number of ways. Then I wanted to ask you, I noticed on your website you also offer child counseling. So what kind of scenario, once again, or child would most benefit from counseling? Perhaps there's something specific that you sort of can unpack for us.
So, of course, parenting, as we know, it's a hard gig. So, we as parents always feel that we need to shoulder all of the responsibility and all of the emotional support. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking a little bit of external assistance. So I primarily work with children in the primary school age. And that is just, an age group that I am passionate with. And, we process things such as grief, trauma, even if the trauma didn't necessarily happen to the child, say mom and dad were involved in a robbery or a hijacking, there is that that trickle down effect. So we work with the child in that space. Emotional regulating, so impulse control, and then even down to things where children are struggling with friendships. We help them navigate that. Of course, bullying comes into it as well. So there's quite a wide scope of topics that, I work with the children, and it's all done
Yes.
at the child's pace, in a gentle way. A lot of play is brought into it because that's how children process things. And you've got to give them that freedom to do that and express themselves.
That's wonderful. That's quite a wide spectrum of things that you can assist with, actually.
A lot of what I have seen in the last year is a lot of grief work, so where children have lost grandparents or siblings. So that's been a big focus of mine in the last year. And of course, there's trauma. We live in a country where children are exposed to certain things, so we process that. But when it comes to trauma, it's obviously we need to be mindful of how much can be done in the counselling space and whether we need to refer out to any other professionals. So it's always being mindful of what the role is as a wellness counsellor and not overstepping those.
Perfect. Tell us why creating harmony within the home and achieving balance is so important to everyone that lives in the house. So whether it's mother, father, child.
Yes. And I always get a smile on my face when we talk about harmony within the home, because my own children tend to give me a little bit of grief around the concept of harmony. And harmony, I want to clarify, harmony does not mean perfection. Not at all. So it doesn't mean it's a perfect home, because no home is going to be perfect all the time. But harmony is really about balance, right? And it's about creating a space where all of our emotions, all of our behaviors, all of who we are as those individual family members are safe and welcome in that home. Yes, not all behaviors. Some behaviors we need to correct and manage, but that's part of learning, right? So harmony is not perfection. I always like to lead with that. But when we live in that kind of environment where the parents feel safe and supported, and when the children feel safe and supported, it creates a balance, is what I always like to say, and it not only impacts how we relate to one another in the home, but also how we relate to the outside world, which is crucial, because that's what we're doing at the end of the day. We are raising these children to eventually leave our home and become successful human beings. So when we are in that balanced, harmonious state, parents are given that emotional grounding. We are taught to lead with love as opposed to logistics and practicality.
That's so true. I think we get caught up in a lot of that and have to take a step back sometimes and kind of remember, we need to bring in the emotion and the kindness and the patience. And you're so right.
Look, I mean, life is busy. We live in such a busy world, and our schedules, our kids' schedules, I mean, they are just, let's be honest. So when I speak about harmony, it's just, yes, we can't take away from that. There are certain things that need to get done. We must attend soccer practices. We must attend birthday parties. But you need to find that balance for your own family, what works for you guys specifically. There is no one size fits all solution to it.
Exactly. Tell us a bit more about why blended families and special needs families would also benefit from your services.
So blended families, special needs families, their dynamics are slightly more layered, a little bit more complex in certain instances, but often these families are overlooked because on the surface, everything generally sometimes looks like, and I'm generally speaking, but it looks like everybody's got everything together. But, when we look at blended families, they may be carrying a lot of emotional weight, and that's past relationships, roles, and even unspoken grief in that family that needs to be handled with sensitivity and care. And when it comes to special needs families, you've got all of those emotional elements, but also the juggle of therapy schedules, financial concerns as well. So there's a lot that can lead to overwhelm within these families. Families are already overwhelmed, and these families, there's an added layer of that. But, no matter our circumstances, no matter where we come from or the family that we are blessed with, we all want to be seen, to be heard, to have our feelings and experiences validated. So important, and especially for blended families, special needs families.
You're so right. I think also perhaps maybe with blended families is you've got so many different dynamics coming from one side on another side, and perhaps maybe the parents aren't on the same parenting page. They maybe view discipline differently, or they maybe view, there could be a lot of things. Maybe their priorities are slightly different, so kind of aligning them.
100%. And it's not easy. I say it is not easy. It is difficult, and especially when there is a lot of emotional weight that comes with that. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's not, but it must always be treated with curiosity. Where is it all coming from? And obviously sensitivity, and I think always with the best interest of the children in mind.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, I mean, our whole thing is about wellness. Our whole drive is to achieve wellness, and it's wellness that starts with the mother, because we're female focused, but also trickles down to her children, obviously. And the mother is predominantly sort of head of the home, predominantly. That's so true.
And
Okay,
a lot,
perfect.
and the wellness
Yes.
of mom, the wellness of mom is just crucial because, as you say, mom is the heart of the home. We need to nurture that and provide that support.
Absolutely. I do have some research-based questions. I was doing a bit of research recently, and I came across a few interesting stats. So the first one, it's based in South Africa. So one notable statistic related to parents struggling with parenting involves the prevalence of parenting stress. I don't think that there's much of a surprise there. According to a study published in 2020, about 34% of parents reported experiencing high levels of parenting stress. That was surprising to me that it wasn't higher.
Yes.
This stress can be attributed to various factors, including economic pressures, the lack of support, and challenges related to child behavior and development. So the one thing that surprised me was that number. To me, it should have been higher, but also I'd love to unpack this whole this whole statistic, and also where the stress is coming from.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say, you would have thought the number would have been higher. And agree. But I think there's also there's like a stigma around admitting to the fact that we are stressed, that we need help, that we need that support. So could indicate that, because it's true. We have this perception that we need to have it all together, right? That if we don't, we're failing. Okay, and that's, nobody wants to fail in this role of parenting. There is a lot of stigma around that, and I think it's just about educating people, making them aware that it doesn't mean that you're failing. Support is out there, support is available, and just making it more acceptable to people. I think it's important. Yeah. But, another aspect which often comes up is that we no longer have these villages. We talk about the village in parenting, and I think I'm not saying anything new here, but, it's the reality of the situation. I think it's very different parenting today, even as opposed to when our parents were parenting us. Families they've moved provinces, maybe for work. Families are smaller. We just don't have that built-in village. But we know that parenting was never meant to be done in isolation. So there's also nothing wrong also with looking for ways to create your own village. And that's being part of community, putting yourself up for joining clubs in your area, and making that village, whatever it means to you. And even if you need to have paid help, creating that village. So important.
Outsourcing.
Yes, outsourcing. Thank you. But at the same time, modern parents, we are stretched thin. That's just the reality. Most parents work full-time jobs, both parents. It is considered a luxury for, moms to be stay-at-home moms. But like I say, generally speaking here, but we are stretched thin emotionally, financially. That is the reality of the situation. So also just, being mindful of that and what our limitations are, because sometimes we push ourselves, and that's why we always hear about this overwhelm and burnout. And those are just reality of the stress that we live under.
It's so true. I think so many families are split up as well. Like you said, we're all in different places, and the thing is to try and outsource or create some kind of a network because, as you said, it should not be done in isolation. Do you find that the factors, the attributed factors that I mentioned, economic pressures, lack of support, challenges to child behavior and development, do you agree with those? Can you add any other things that might contribute?
Like we discussed earlier, single parent households, that's another factor, because that is the reality. We are seeing more and more of that. I also think exposure, I think we touched on it just now as well, exposure to violence and trauma contributes to that stress. We live in these communities that are affected by crime and domestic violence, and that is a contributing factor, undoubtedly. Of course, also, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, educational challenges. So, you always see, at the beginning of the year, parents stressing about getting their kids into the schools and the systems and making sure that there's space. Again, added pressure to make sure that we are in the right place, that we have them, at the right school. Education is just a huge stressor as well. Are we doing enough? Are we giving enough of ourselves again? So we also live in this digital world, right? So we are exposed to so much, and I'm talking social media, right? And we see a lot of perfection out there. So then we enter into comparison, and that's a dangerous space to be. Also elicits a lot of stress because we're comparing constantly, that our lives are not these picture perfect Pinterest, Instagram reels. There's reality.
And you're so right about the education thing. I didn't even think of that, because there's also a lot, because now the children are really expected to achieve. I'm finding that, if I to compare how I was at my daughter's age, the expectations are insane to me. And so there's this huge amount of pressure, not only on the child to perform, but if the child's kind of needing a bit of assistance, it's on the parent, and they're meant to find the time, and it's the amount of pressure and stress is quite bad, as you said. That's a whole nother factor that's very much there.
Exactly, 100%. There is a lot of that, but like I say, it's separating what you are able to do. So it's really about sitting down, looking at what the expectations are and what is your reality.
Yes, and also to maybe, it seems so overwhelming, but sometimes just to sit there and go, okay, what, separate the stress and the anxiety and the uncertainty, and kind of see what the practical side of it is. Because sometimes when there's a lot of emotion attached to something, I get extremely emotional about anything to do with my child. It's kind of giving yourself the time to process that, separate it, and then go, okay, what is my action plan here? What am I actually going to achieve? How am I going to achieve it? And then you feel like you've got a bit more control over the whole thing, as much as can be achieved.
100%. And that is, it's just about, as you say, bringing in the practicality, bringing in the realistic part of it, and actually just having that talk, because sometimes it feels like we're just never kind of able to keep our head above water, because it's just more expectations that are piled on us. And it's actually, and then I think it also comes into boundaries. Boundaries are really important in parenting and in maintaining an acceptable level of stress, because stress is always kind of going to be there, but it's important to have boundaries, be okay and comfortable with laying out those boundaries, and then following through with it, and that is important.
Yes, absolutely. You touched on something just now about single parent households, and that's actually my next research-based question. According to the 2021 census, about 38%, which once again I thought was low, 38% of children live in single-parent households, the majority of which are women, which would increase the amount of stress. Many single parents face not only the financial difficulties, but also limited access to resources and support networks. These factors can snowball the struggles parents face in providing a stable and nurturing environment for their children. So, how would you be able to sort of step into a family like this and help them to manage better?
So I think, like we mentioned as well, that, And again, generally, we're looking at a lot of moms who are dads do take the responsibility, but primarily we're looking at the moms. And I think it's really about starting with a lot of self-work as well. There's a lot of rebuilding that needs to happen in these situations. But as we said earlier, moms are heart of the home. So working with moms to reconnect with themselves, implementing self-care is so important, because I think in single parent. Sorry, that is my dog barking. I apologize for that.
Clearly got a lot to say to add to the family unit.
Sorry about that. But yeah, so rebuilding that reconnection with self, making her, or getting her to a point where she understands that it is not a luxury, but rather a necessity for her well-being. And of course, like we said, there's often that trickle-down effect from mom's well-being into the rest of the family. Also helping to build and rebuild that emotional connection with the children, finding their new normal, their new way of life, really important. And just creating rhythms and systems within the home that work in this new. And so it's really bringing in, working with the emotional, but bringing in the practical.
So it's almost setting like a new routine. And that routine is so important to create that safety, that feeling of safety. It's almost like you know what to expect, what's going to come after this, what's going to come after that. I suppose it's extremely important, especially when the child is young.
Yes. And I mean, there will be routines and, things that are laid out, when they go through, the divorce proceedings and family court and all of that. But it's really bringing in, looking at it from a more personal, more emotional point of view, and making sure that everyone in the family is, as I said earlier, seen, heard, and validated. And I think with a single parent as well, again, stretched thin. There's so many expectations and pressures from various domains coming at this parent. And that's why I think self-care in this domain is also really, really important, because, that's what they need. It fuels us. It allows us to, it gives us the ability to do more, to give more of ourselves. Because if we're constantly running, we'll eventually, reach that burnout and overwhelm.
If your cup is empty, and I can say this, I find I am so short-tempered. I don't have the patience. I don't have the kindness. I need to immediately, A, recognize that, B, take a step back, take the time, do whatever I need to do, and then come back to the situation and handle it as I should, better.
Exactly.
It's so important.
Exactly, and it's a tool that I often teach my moms, whether they're postpartum or in the counselling space, is the power of the pause. And it truly is such a powerful, it's seemingly so simple, but it's not really when you're caught up in the moment. And as we are feeling all those emotions start to rise, but the power of the pause, because the pause allows us to, and whatever that pause may be, maybe it's actually physically leaving the room, maybe it's doing a bit of breath work, but the pause moves us from a space of reacting and exploding towards responding, which is much more positive, much more constructive, and all of that for everybody who's in that particular moment. So power of the pause is key.
It's crucial. It's actually crucial, and recognizing when that needs to happen as well.
Yeah. And it's a difficult thing, because when we are so caught up in the moment and emotions are running high, not always easy to do, but with practice it comes.
No. And exactly, I was just going to say, practice is the key. Once you start implementing the tools, it will eventually become your second nature to do that. So you won't have to consciously think, I need to do this. It will just become part of the process.
And another thing that's so important as part of that is also the power of repair. There is nothing wrong with repairing with our children, apologizing, explaining. There's a lot of power in that moment. So even when things go wrong, they don't go according to plan and whatever may be, to take the time to reconnect and repair. It's strengthening that bond. It's explaining things. It's, creating that emotional awareness, understanding. Crucial.
Absolutely. Okay, so the next question is Creating a stable and secure home for a child is critically important, and various statistics highlight its importance on child development and well-being. A loving and stable home positively influences emotional development, academic success, future economic stability, health outcomes, and strong and healthy social skills. Can you speak about this a bit more? Some really interesting ones there.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's a quote, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to mess it up, but I think it just sums up this perfectly. But the most important work you will ever do will be within the walls of your own home. I haven't said it correctly anyway, but that is what the most important work you'll ever do is within the walls of your home. And that is true. And I think, it speaks to the importance of our children feeling safe and feeling stable. But not only our children, us as well. We also, as adults within the home, want safe and secure and stable in that home. I think that quote just speaks volumes about that and the importance of connection within the family unit. Because, as you say, this impacts so many areas of our children's lives.
It's practically everything.
Everything, right? So, as you said, emotional health, academic, future relationships, their own ability to carry themselves, self-esteem, resilience, confidence. It's massive.
And even their economic future success. That is,
yes,
that makes so much sense, but it's quite scary. You need to set them up correctly.
Exactly. So again, it's important to know this, but not be affected negatively by it, because I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear him. He's just a puppy and get involved. I'm so sorry about that. It's so important not to also be fearful of it. So I think things like that are meant to, statistics and all of that, and the information is meant to create that awareness. It's, we don't want to create that fear that every time we mess up, we're gonna, mess up. So it's to be mindful, to allow it to guide the decisions that we make and how we react. And, as I say, just parenting, we need to be conscious, we need to be intentional, and that is, it's a lot. It's a lot. It really is a lot to work with all the time. We can make mistakes. We do make mistakes. We are going to make many mistakes, and it is okay. It is okay. But like I say, circling back to the repair with our children, the reconnection with our children in those moments, really important. So, all homes will go through fluctuations. It's normal. But like I say, if we can find our way back to stability, back to security, important.
I think it's also interesting maybe to bring in generational trauma or generational perhaps sort of issues that are within a family. There's an anger issue, or maybe there's always been a priority of a certain thing that is perhaps not great. It's maybe a toxic thing, and kind of recognizing that and trying to do a little bit better for not only yourself but your child. So maybe you'll try and focus on that trait that perhaps is not great, or implement new processes that will help lead you away from something that wasn't working with your parents and yourself. So it's just about improving a little bit for the next generation, so they're better equipped to deal with whatever world they're going to be living in.
Exactly. And I think, it made me think of a conversation I had the other day where, we're building, excuse me, sorry, we're building legacies. We're building legacies within our homes. And if we can remember that, but again, not take the pressure with that. And as you said, it's noticing where we have, these generational or whatever filtering down, and being conscious and working with them.
Yes, exactly. I've noticed on your website there's a lot of focus on brainstorming, strategy, and practical integration methodology. Can you chat to us through this? Do you find that this is the best methodology? There's obviously a lot of practical stuff.
Yeah. So I really don't believe in vague advice, because that doesn't serve anybody anything. So what I like, what I try to put across, and what I've tried to explain on the website, is that, it's every family is unique, every situation is unique, every individual in that family is unique. So there is going to be a fair amount of trial and error with certain things. So you've got a particular issue. Okay, let's look at it from this way. I think what I'm trying to say is collaboration. So collaboration between myself and the family. It's not me leading the way saying, hey, I have all the answers. No, I'm walking alongside this family, supporting you, maybe giving alternate perspective, giving options. But at the end of the day, the work lies within the family in order to implement those tools, implement those skills, and see what works for them. Because, like I said, every situation is different. So there has to be that element of collaboration, conversation. It's a work in progress.
Yes, compromise, flexibility, sort of finding the right tools and process for each family. Okay, perfect. I also noticed you've got quite a few blogs up, which are amazing. They're split up into self-care, which I know you've already chatted about, childcare, and postpartum care, which is super, super important. Can you guide us through some of your themes?
So, yes, so the blogs are just added value. I often think of, the mom late at night scrolling, looking for information, looking for resources. I think we've all been there.
So true.
And that's what the blogs are for. It's just, for some, information, some guidance. It's really about meeting the moms where they're at. So whether you're looking at self-care, postpartum care, or childcare, meeting them where they're at and just giving them, that a little bit of empowerment. So obviously postpartum care, we're looking at our postpartum mommies and families. So looking at things, physically healing. We just did one on pelvic floor healing, really important.
Yes.
The importance of sleep, we need our sleep, really important.
That's always important.
So practical things, self-care as well. Like I said earlier, if we can work on our own self, managing ourselves, managing our emotions, our own regulation, again, trickle down effect into the rest of the family. So really empowering. And of course, childcare. We have a lot of questions when it comes to our children, and I think a lot of guilt as well that comes with that. So like I said earlier, are we doing the right thing? Am I messing up? Am I failing? So really just providing that information, resource to parents that you're not failing. You're just human, and giving more clarity on topics that are sort of front of mind for a lot of parents with younger children.
Yes, I actually read quite a few of them, and they're really, really helpful. They're sort of not overwhelming, which is fantastic. I think especially if you're in the postpartum period, anything and everything can trigger you and make you feel like there's judgment around every corner. But they were sort of just enough information. Also, that there's this lovely tone to them. They're very calm, they're soothing, they're giving you really good tips on certain things. And I also thought your self-care, for someone that's only learned about that recently and the importance of it, the value of it, I always thought it was a bit of brushed off nonsense. And then I realized just how crucial it actually is to everything, especially as I'm getting older, and also to pass that on to my daughter. So she watches me doing my self-care. So she hopefully will sort of take that on herself, And I just thought how important it is, because some of us don't know how to do self-care. We don't have a clue. So to give those tips and guidance is amazing. Such a welcoming space.
It's lovely to hear that because, in all honesty, like you say, the moms who are reading it, the people who are reading it, it's about, there's no judgment. So whatever you're searching, whatever you're asking for, there's no judgment. Information is power. And that is so important, as we want to empower people to be better, to do better, to take care of themselves. And like you say, with the self-care element, there's such misconception around self-care. It's not all just bubble baths and weekends away from your family. No, self-care can take place in those micro moments. So even if you only have 5 minutes a day, well, let's take that 5 minutes and let's make it something meaningful that's going to add, as you said, fill your cup. That is so, so, so important for all moms, all parents, no matter what stage of parenting you're in.
It's so true. I always think those self-care things can also, I'm quite a practical person by nature. I think that's why I was drawn to so much of your stuff. I'm very practically driven. So I will take the time if I'm struggling that day. It will either be some movement because I'm killing two birds with one stone, or it will be, if it's exceptionally bad, a delicious treat. Perhaps is not on the other end of the scale. The kindness towards yourself. I
Yes,
think that's such an
exactly.
important thing.
Exactly, because we're not taught that, or certainly our generation has not been taught that.
No,
And
not at all.
and we all, to some degree or another, walk around with the inner critic, and that inner critic can be pretty nasty, right?
Awful.
Yes, so it's about working with that. We acknowledge it. Where does it come from? Okay, how do we tame that?
Yes.
So, like I say, there's so many elements to all of this, and it's really empowering. It really is, to start working within it and working for yourself.
Self-care is a tool.
It really is. And like I say, it's different for everybody. So my self-care is very different to your self-care. And that's okay. But it's about finding that magic formula and making it work, and prioritizing it so that it is a non-negotiable in your day. And self-care is not selfish. Self-care is not selfish. I know we have read that and seen it 100 times, but it's worthy of mentioning.
We also see that you do podcasting as well. Tell us more. We were so excited to see that.
Yes, so the podcast just kind of came about as an added value for moms, but they've been really great, and they've been really fun. And I'm now doing the podcast with a co-host. Her name is Kaylee Hillebrand. She is a content creator on social media, also a mother. So I think the dynamic is quite nice. She brings in the real and the humor, and her and I chat about various topics. We've discussed fear in motherhood, which is a big one. Fear coming up right from preconception. Throughout your mothering journey, you'll be confronted with fear in various shapes and forms. We are doing one on judgment, which again is a big one, because as mothers, as parents, we face judgment from many angles, and it's about, where the judgment comes from, how we deal with it, how we process it, how we work with it, and even positively how we can allow, it to fuel us as well, and make it a motivating factor. We're gonna dive into that. And a very, very interesting one, and I think something that is less spoken about maybe, and that it should be launching within the next couple of days, is the impact of parenting on our relationships with our partners, and what is the expectation that we have around our relationships post-baby, post-children, and what is the reality, because let's face it, it's two different things.
I can't believe how few people speak about that, actually. Now that you brought it up, it is huge. Everything changes.
Are ways to be conscious about it and intentional with your time with one another, and the way you spend time, how you spend that time. So important, because we have this relationship, and yes, sometimes it's meant to work out, sometimes not, but we don't want there to be this divide between us, because we had let's do this journey together. So we talk about it, and again, I think a lot of stuff in this space circles back to communication and the importance of communicating with one another openly, honestly, and correctly communicating as well, because of course, when we are tired, when our hormones are all over the place, communication. Yes. But it's work, intentional work, and it's a beautiful space, because yes, there are a lot of challenges, but there is beauty in it as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Perfect. And then the last question is contact details. If someone is sort of reaching out to them, and they really feel like they want to get hold of you, what platforms are you on? How can they get hold of you? And I've already mentioned your website and Instagram. We've chatted on there as well.
So yes, of course, I'm on social media. So I predominantly use Instagram and Facebook, so Harmony at Home SA. And my website, harmonyathome.co.za. You also can email me, Lauren at Harmony at Home. .co.za, or even pop me a WhatsApp. I can share my number with you. It's 082-497-5933. Pop me a WhatsApp. I'm more than happy to talk and see how I can support you. If you have any questions, let's chat.
Your website's great. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an amazing, insightful chat, and
Beautiful.
we are so grateful to have had this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was lovely. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.